Blog Talk Radio.
Horror enthusiasts and fans of things that go bump in the night, rejoice, as there is a new collection of creepy tales to keep your spine tingling and your blood running cold.
He's gonna kill me.
The brainchild of prolific author Yvonne Mason. Welcome to Your Nightmare is an anthology of stories from a gifted batch of writers specializing in keeping you up at night. Whether you love gruesome tales of murder and mayhem, or you prefer quaint tales of scary happenings, welcome to Your Nightmare is sure to please the inner psychopath and whet even the most insatiable horror appetite. Welcome to Your Nightmare is available now on Amazon.com.
Well, good evening, boys and girls, children of all ages, and all of my listening audience. This is Thursday night. It is 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and this is Off the Chain. I'm your host, Yvonne Mason, and yes, that was a shameless piece of promotion for my anthology, Welcome to Your Nightmare. I gathered a group of writers up and asked them if they wanted to play with me, and they said yes. So they all contributed little horror stories to that book. Now, also included in that book is a horror story by the one and only Nicholas Grabowski, who will also be a guest on this show again. He and I have been friends for years. So you want to go, no, you can't go now. You have to wait till after the show. So you want to go and order the book both in paperback and on Kindle. It's also on Barnes & Noble. But you got to wait till after the show. I have to tell you, I have some great news. As of this morning, the numbers for this show is at 3,987 listeners just on Blog Talk. We are heard at 66% out of Australia. Now, I don't know why the good old USA is lagging behind by 30-something%. I don't know. I guess they sleep through dinner or something. But our biggest listeners come out of Australia. So with that being said, on March the 6th, we are going to have a group from Down Under to visit us and to play their music and sing their songs and interview them. And I can't wait for you guys to sit in the Cavatursi Brothers. And then tomorrow night, y'all get to hear me be interviewed by a friend of mine. This should be interesting. I've seen the questions. They really are off the chain. So that's just the beginning of our weekend and the beginning of next week. I also want to give a shout-out to an author by the name of Andrew Bouchard. He's written a cute little book called The Seduction of Anita Sarkinson. And it goes like this. Anita Sarkinson doesn't want you to read this book. So if you hate Anita, then why not irritate her by purchasing a copy? It's romance, it's funny, and it's a wild ride. It's on Amazon. So y'all go over there and irritate Anita and order this book for Andrew Bouchard. Sounds like an excellent, excellent book. Now, if you want to get a shout-out or you want to run an ad on this show, go over to AdvertiseCast and look up Off the Chain. My charges are so reasonable, you think you done stole it and run with it. So without further ado, now that we've got all the business out of the way, tonight's show is a very interesting show, and it is up my alley in the fact that those of you who know me know that I am an advocate for children, and because I believe that children are our future. And in being our future, we don't hurt our future, because when we hurt our future, we hurt ourselves. And when we hurt ourselves, we have no future. The young man that I am, and yes, I say he's young because everybody's young to me, this young man has had a very interesting life, and for him to still be with us is a reason. I always say that God has a plan, and that God takes care of things, and we might not always know God's plan, and we might not always think that God knows things, but He does. And in knowing those things, God takes care of things. God took care of this young man. God sent him the people he needed when he needed them. His name is Kim Hemphill, and he has published his first book. He lives in the Pacific Northwest in Spokane, Washington. And he's been married to his wife for 35 years. They have a son who's currently attending the Gonzaga University. Kim has been a real estate appraiser for over 40 years, and he and his wife have operated their company together for the past 3 decades. They've been blessed with great success, and they feel very fortunate, as this life, in Kim's words, were gifted to him by angels on earth. Now, I've read you his bio, and when he says that his life has been gifted to him by angels on earth, I'm going to let Kim tell you his story. Good evening, my friend. How are you?
Very good, Yvonne. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on Off the Chain.
Well, thank you for agreeing to spend an hour with me. I'm honored and I'm humbled because I truly believe that you are here for a reason. And that reason is to be an advocate for children and to use your wisdom and your experiences to help others. Why don't you tell the audience your story and why you have chosen this path?
Well, the main thought that I have is when I wrote the book, I remember the time, is it was my memories. So I thought back, well, what was the first memory that I had in my life? And I've asked hundreds, if not thousands, of people, what was your first memory? And some folks it's been as early as 1 year old, and most of them are around 3 or 4 years old, and then some a little later. But my first memory was when I was 3 years old, and it was in 1954, and my grandfather had decided, that my mother and my brother and myself were going to go over and visit his sister. So it was my great aunt, and she lived right here in Spokane. So it was about a 5-mile ride, and we got to about a half a mile or so from her place, and my grandfather had not looked well enough. And back then there were no guards or bells or whistles for the train crossings. And he pulled across right in front of a train, and it hit our car. And I have to say, I don't remember the car getting hit, or I don't remember my mother getting thrown from the car. What I remember is that the first aid people had taken me into a utility company. Back then it was called Washington Water Power Company. But they'd taken me into their lobby, and I was unconscious, and they were trying to sew me up because I had suffered some severe lacerations across my face. But the first memory was when I woke up and I looked across, and there was my brother, who I was 3 years old and he was almost 5, and his eyes were huge as saucers, looking and watching as this doctor's got me in this chair, and he is hoovering over me, sewing me up. And it took 105 stitches to sew this gash across my face. And I remember being worried about my mother and my grandfather and where were they, or did they get killed, or so that was the first memory. And then it kind of went downhill from there. On the other children can be very insensitive, and at that time of my life, that's when I learned how to hate. And what I mean by the hate is I hated the tormenting and the teasing from the other children. I hated the double looks that I would get from adults going, wow, what happened to him? Worst of all, I hated looking in the mirror and seeing this little boy. I'd gone from a nice, good-looking kid to a broken, ugly one. And so this started all of this. And I guess I just hated standing out and being different than anyone. And I hated the bullying. And that lasted for decades. I couldn't stand the bullies. So that was my first memory. Do you recall your first memory?
No.
No?
I
Was
do
it last
not
week?
recall.
No, I'm joking.
It was probably last week.
But and so then it went from there, and please interrupt me because I'll just keep on talking.
No,
But,
I want you to tell the story, so keep going.
Okay. So it went from there to my mother at the time was not well, and she had a degenerative bone disease, and so they had to remove her legs. But they started out low, and they kept cutting her legs off higher and higher. And she was handicapped, and I think that this had a big impact on my father. I think he actually hated being married to her and having to put up with all of that. So he had a chip on his shoulder, and then he had a kid like me that had a chip on his shoulder. And so it started out, never once did he ever tell me he loved me. He didn't want to be around me. And so I took this all as a young boy, that I was broken, ugly, and he didn't love me. So the child abuse from him began, and I can recall that I could really never do anything right in his eyes, and some of it I brought on myself because I didn't like the way I was treated, and I recall wetting the bed, and he would beat me for wetting the bed. And then he ratcheted the punishment up to where he would hang these blankets over my head and beat me. And that was his way that he was going to cure. Because I think in his mind, he looked at it as I was just being lazy, and that I liked the fact of laying in a bed and urinating all over myself. So, and I think that he was beat as a child, and so it went from his mean mother that he grew up into a mean father, and that continued on for years. There'd be times that, and my mother was helpless to defend. When she would be in the hospital, she'd be in the hospital for a month at a time. So it was just terror around our home to have a father that felt he was in prison and couldn't figure out a way to get out. And I thought back over the years, the reason he couldn't leave is everybody would look down on him and go, "You left your handicapped wife and your children." So he was trapped. So he made it miserable for everyone. And then particularly anybody that would stand up to him, and that was me. So I didn't cower to the guy, and that just brought on more abuse. That led on. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, continue.
So that led to that. Through grade school and junior high was not a good time for me. I do have to say that my grandmother, who was as crazy as he was, she comes to our home one day and announces to me, well, I figured it out. I'm going to take Kim to the chiropractor, and he'll cure his bedwetting. And I thought to myself, I thought, are you nuts? You must be out of your mind. So, but I had learned a long time ago, you didn't argue with her and you didn't argue with your father. You just shut up and you did as you were told. So off we go to the chiropractor. And I can recall the guy pulling on my legs and my arms and my spine, and bones are popping and this and that. And I'm going, this is crazy. So when he gets all done, he says, well, I can't see anything skeletal with his skeleton or his bones that's causing him to wet the bed. So he sent her up to pay the bill. And then he turns to me and he goes, you want to know a secret? And like any kid would, when I was 8 or 9 years old, yeah. What's the secret? And he goes, you got a muscle. And then he took his fingers and he formed it like a little mouth, his thumb and his forefinger. He goes, you got a muscle that holds your urine in. And he goes, your muscle's weak, you wet the bed. Because if you start holding your urine and holding that until it hurts, in a matter of no time, you're going to have the strongest bladder there is. Well, I started, and then when the grandmother come back, we didn't say a word. It was our secret. Well, I started doing that. And then in 2 weeks, I didn't wet the bed anymore. But yet my father would force me to urinate all the time, which weakened the muscles. So with the beatings and the urination, constant urination, he created the issues. So this went on for years with the abuse, and then it switched from the bedwetting to the school grades, my grades in school. The beatings would happen for that. And then one day, this was during the summer, he told my brother and I, and my mother was off in the hospital again, he laid out 9 hours work that better be done by the time he got back from work that day. And I'm not talking idle chores, I'm talking the whole place, floor scrubbed, cleaned, the yard. It was slave labor. And so that day there was a big baseball game down at the vacant lot on the corner. And so, being smart me, I go, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go play baseball for 3 hours, and then I'll come home and work at night and make up for the time I'm gone. Now, my brother was smart enough to just stay home and get his work done, but I went and played. And then I get home just before he got home from work, and I'm out in the backyard doing my pulling weeds and whatever they had me doing. And he comes up to me, he goes, why isn't your work done? I said, well, there's a big baseball game, and I thought I could work tonight. Well, that was not acceptable to him. He says, I didn't tell you to go play baseball today and then work tonight. I told you to get this done while I was at work. And I stood up from kneeling down pulling weeds, and he hit me in the head with his fist and knocked me off into the lilac bushes. And when I woke up, I'm in his arms, and he's running to the house with me. And I'm sure it was he thought he killed me, and that he didn't want the neighbors to see this, because we had backyard, they were butted up and close. And when I come awake from being unconscious, I saw that I was in his arms, and I mustered up all the strength I could, and I jumped out of his arms, and I hated the man. And I started in with logger talk to that guy and told him how I was going to call the police, that I was going to have him arrested. That was the last time he ever hit me, for fear that I would turn him in. And I had shaken him up a lot more than I thought by that threat. I had stood up to him. And at that point, I didn't see the bully and all the temper. I saw a timid, weak, he was taken back by it all. And I knew at that moment, Yvonne, that I won something. I finally won something. Started walking just a little bit taller. So a few years go by, no more beatings, but really no love in the family, except for my mother and my brother. And so then that led up to that when we got into high school, he decided we were moving to the country, which was 30, 40 miles north of Spokane. And my brother was, he'd always gotten very good grades. His name was Craig, and he wanted to be a doctor. But the family had no money, and, you know, we lived just mouth to mouth, and no milk, you drank water, blah, blah, blah. So, make a long story short on that, my brother decides that he's a senior now in high school, that he's going to join the service. Excuse me. And excuse me for 1 second. I got to take a drink of water here.
That's quite all right.
Thank you. So he decides he's going to join the service, and this is in 1968. So he graduates in 1969. We spent a few weeks with him, and he, you know, and at that time, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, at that point in time, the U.S. military had the lottery where they drew the birthdays out of the hat.
Oh, yes. Remember, that's my war.
Yeah. Well, at that time in Vietnam was going on, blazing, the big, every night on the news, since it was your war, you recall how, I mean, they had the reporters on the ground, and every night they showed these horrific battles, and they showed people getting executed and shot in the streets of Da Nang, and remember all that?
Oh, yes, very well.
So here, my lottery number means I'm going to Vietnam. But Craig's lottery number, he's not going. But he goes down and joins the Marines anyway because he benefits for the college education. And so he graduates that year from high school, goes down to San Diego at the Marine base there, and then he goes to Vietnam. And he told us that it would be a couple of weeks before, 2 to 3 weeks before we would get any letters from him, that it took a while to move the mail. So we were anxiously awaiting. But during this time that he had left, my father moved us up into the country from a small house in Spokane, that he put us at a dead-end road in more like a travel trailer. The thing was like 8 feet wide and 30 feet long. And it was the bathroom, you couldn't turn around in it. There was one bedroom to it. There was a couple of bunk beds. And so, and at that point I had a sister, so she slept, she got the bunk bed thing in the hallway, and he built a shed for me to sleep in that was detached from the building. And he had taken these 1x4s and laid them down flat and built it like you would a log house. And then he put a roof on it, and then he put some rolled roofing on it. It was a shed. And then he took a chainsaw, cut the windows out, and then he put some used windows in there. And he built the door with the big X across the front like a shed. And that was my bedroom. Well, I hated the thing. It was dark and gloomy, even with the one window it had. And then at that point, he decided he was going to be a trucker, a long-haul trucker. And then it all started to materialize what he was doing. We weren't moving to the country, just my mother and myself and my sister, and he basically abandoned us. And here's a woman that has degenerative bone disease. She has no legs. She's got to go up these flight of stairs to get to this travel trailer, so she'd have to sit on her backside and go up on her fanny. She had lost her bowels and her bladder and went in a bag. And he took us out there and he abandoned us, and he got on that truck. And he would be home once a month. Well, at this point in time is when Craig went to Vietnam. And we're waiting for those letters. And also at this time, I couldn't handle living in that shed anymore. So I got a tent, and I moved into the tent. I pitched it out in the meadow below where this travel trailer was. It wasn't far from the travel trailer. And I'd rather sleep in the tent. So one Saturday, and it was 48 years ago today, that I'm in my tent laying on my cot reading a book, and up pulls the military car. Now, this is at a dead-end road. They didn't even maintain the road. It was a gravel road. They didn't grader it. They didn't do nothing. It was more of a trail. And here comes these military guys with all of their uniform and all of their medals and their crisp, clean uniforms. And when they pulled up, I got the worst feeling in my life, and I thought, what are they doing up here? And I come firing out of my tent, and I ran down to the road, and I says, can I help you? He says, is this the Hemphill residence? Yeah. Are your parents home? And my dad had happened to be off the truck and had come home for the one day. And so I took him up to the trailer, and they come in, and they asked us to sit down, and they told us that my brother had got killed, and he had made it over there for 2 weeks. And my poor mother, the howling, the screeching, the pain, you could cut her legs off, you could take her bladder, you could take her bowels, but it broke her. She was done, and she never recovered from it. So I didn't cry. I was numb, and it took about a month to get him home, or several weeks. I recall going out to the airport, and all of the official, the generals, and on that were out there to honor him coming home, bringing our soldier home. And we found out that when a soldier goes to Vietnam, they keep him in the back. He's called a newbie.
Uh-huh.
And they try to teach these kids how to survive this war and how these Viet Cong would fight.
Yep.
Well, so Craig's in the back, and you know, we hunted food. We hunted deer and bear to eat, and he was a crack shot. He'd be a sniper. So he's in the back, and there's all of these Viet Cong snipers up in the trees killing all the soldiers up front. And Craig saw all of this, so he ran to the front and pulled the bazooka gun off of the dead Marine, and he started in killing the Viet Cong. And they went on to say that the rest of the group watched as he got shot in the body. He kept fighting, and he'd take shots to the limbs, and then finally they shot him in the head, killed him, but he'd saved the remainder of the crew or his platoon. So he was an ultimate hero. He never ran from anything. He always ran to trouble to help people, and he died from it. So after, I'd say a few weeks, then my father, and I didn't know it at the time, but he had met some lady in a cafe on at some trucker stop. He left finally for good. And this led to, and I had to get my mother back into Spokane and out of the hills because she's going to die up there. And she was overdosing on her medication. Nobody was home within her heart, her mind. She would sit in the chair in her recliner, and she'd sit there all day and all night. She didn't get up and go to bed. So I intervened with the drugs and got her back in Spokane, got her on some subsidized housing, and she got off the medication, and she got conscious again. She never got over the pain, but at that point, I wanted to go to Vietnam, and I wanted to kill all those people that I could. And she had some recruitment people come out from the Army and the Marines, and they said, "You're sole surviving son. You don't have to go." And I said, "Well, I'm going anyway." They said, "No, you're not. Not with your attitude. You won't get past peeling potatoes." And they were pretty convincing that they weren't going to let me go over there and kill anybody. So at that time, I had started dating a girl. She got pregnant. So I married her within 30 days, 18 years old. Got a job in a factory. In fact, it was, you probably heard of Kaiser.
I have. I have heard of Kaiser.
And what's ironic is my father used to work for Kaiser, but he quit. And Kaiser was a good union job for a working class guy. And he went from Kaiser's wages down to minimum wage working in a warehouse in a seed factory. But so all of his money problems and all of his pain was brought on a lot by himself in his lack of maturity. But anyway, back to, I got a job at Kaiser, and I was pretty proud of it. And then the marriage at 18 years old, gee, surprise, it fell apart when I was 22. And I don't think I ever loved the girl, but I loved my kids. But she divorced me, and so I had never dated any women before, I'd been with this one girl. So I started going out and learning how to dance and learning how to be somewhat social. And I had a good time doing that and partying and drinking and raising all sorts of heck. And then I met a lady that had graduated from college in the University of Hawaii. And I thought, wow, here I am, a laborer, and I could attract something like that. But I was 22 and she was nearly 40. Now, what do they call that, Yvonne, a cougar?
Yes, now they call it a cougar.
I don't mean to offend you or your listeners.
Oh, honey, you're not offending me at all.
Okay. So she comes home one day and she says, "Well, guess what I'm going to be?" And I go, "What are you going to be?" She goes, "I'm going to be an appraiser." And I go, "What is that?" And she throws her hands up and, they do all sorts of things with houses. I mean, she didn't know what they did, but she was college. So, in fact, she was personnel director of the bank. So she wasn't, she was a somebody, and I was impressed to be with her. But I told her, I said, well, that's what I'm going to be. And she says, you can't do that. And I says, why can't I? Well, you have no background. You have no education. You don't even have a suit. You don't know how to walk and talk in the business world. And furthermore, you have to belong to the good old boys club. I said, oh, really? And I was offended as all get out. And she says, you've got exams and tests that you just won't make it, so don't waste your time. Well, back then when I worked at Kaiser, you got 10 weeks of vacation with 13 weeks pay after you put 5 years in. Well, I had my 5 years. So I took my vacation with the 13 weeks pay, and I said, I'm going to take the course. And she goes, well, she said, and she was dead set against this. And she says, well, before you can take the course, you have to take a 4-hour exam just to qualify to take the course for appraising. I said, fine, then I'll take it. Now, I'd never passed an exam in my life. I didn't do well in school. And so I got the book, and I studied it, and she did. And then we went down to take this 4-hour exam. And after about 45 minutes, I turned my exam in and went outside, found a bench, went to sleep. And she comes out about 3 hours later, madder than heck. See what I told you? You couldn't do it. You quit. You've wasted your time. You've wasted your vacation. And her and I were supposed to travel around the United States and the continental U.S., and I had canceled that to do this. So she, and at that time, I recall that you had to fill out the envelope with your address, and then they would mail you the results. So she'd come out that 3 hours later. We went home. Didn't think anything about it. We waited a week or so, and then finally one Saturday, we get home, and there's the envelopes. And I recall the memory. The envelopes are in our mailbox at the front of the house, and mine looked like some kindergartner filled it out. Terrible penmanship. And I recall her penmanship, that eloquent, beautiful handwriting. And so we go into the house, and I rip open my envelope, and I see that I passed. But I didn't say anything to her. And so I wait, and she opens hers up, and she's like paralyzed. She can't move. And I'm waiting, but I got my poker face on. I'm not letting her know. And then pretty soon tears start running down her cheeks. And she breaks out crying. So I take the envelope out of her hand, and I see that she flunked.
Uh-oh.
She went straight in the bedroom, got under the covers, spent the rest of the day, and that night didn't come out of the bedroom. Well, I'm going, I passed. I did it. But it was only the first exam. So, but
you passed.
But that's
see,
all it took, Yvonne.
Kim,
I was thrilled.
The thing is, Kim, here you are, a child of an abused family with little or no education, and you passed in the first exam to get in appraiser school. You were the smartest kid in the room there. Think about it. You were the smartest kid in the room.
Well, I was walking on air. And so now I'm going, well, wait a minute. Now, she comes back out the next day. She goes, are you going to tell me what you did? I said, I passed. Well, she was in shock. And I think the relationship with her, as long as I was subservient As long as I was the laborer and she was the executive, everything was fine. And so then I go down and I go, okay, now I got to enroll in this other course. And this was a course 101 of appraising. And so I call up the Appraisal Institute and I get the name of the chapter in Spokane. And I called the guy up and I get the guy and I said, can I come out and have a cup of coffee with you? Oh, by all means. So I go out there and I said, I want to be an appraiser. I just passed this. And he's a real pleasant guy. And this is my first angel on earth. Because this guy's college educated. He owns a huge appraisal company in Spokane. And he belonged to the good old boy club. And I says, but I have, and I had an instant trust of the man. And I said, I need to tell you about my background. And I go, I'm a laborer. I work for Kaiser. I don't know this and I don't know that. And I told him everything that I wasn't. And he goes, you can do it. And I says, well, then sign me up for this course, but I want to pay for it right now, and I want to buy the book right now. But it wasn't supposed to start for a couple of weeks. Because you want to buy the book now? I says, yeah. And so he gives me the book. I sign up. I'm gone with the book. This guy's name was Jim. And I get home with the book, and oh, my goodness. I don't know a word in the book. I don't understand any of it. And the mathematics and the arithmetic. And then my friend, my older friend, she says to me, you know, you can pass that first exam, but getting past this one is where the roadblock happens. You can pass this exam, but you have to be hired by a bank. And that's what I've been trying to tell you. No bank is going to hire you. And she was a banker. So I sit there for 10 weeks, and I read this book and read this book and reread this book and take these mock exams, and I don't understand one word of it. I memorized it all. But I didn't understand any of it. It was like singing a French song, but you didn't know what you were singing.
Right.
You didn't know what. So I go in, I go to take the exam, and then, by the way, I would go to class, and I was so nervous and so shaking inside that I would sit up, and I'd be the front desk, and I'd be staring at this Jim, who was the instructor. And then pretty soon the chemistry started going with us, that if I put a stupid look on my face, like, what's that mean? He would stop and go, do you have a question? And then he started coming in early before class and staying after class to try and get me to wade through this stuff. And so this went on for the 10 weeks, and then it was time to take the test. I'm nervous as heck. I don't know what I'm going to do. I still really don't understand any of it. And so the exam is to be taken, and you got the exam. It's all turned down on the desk, and you can't touch anything until he punches the clock. And I flip it over, and now I can't see. I'm totally confused. I'm having a panic attack. I don't know what to do. So I turn the exam into him, and he goes, what are you doing? I said, I got to go outside and have some fresh air. I can't think. I can't read. I'm in total confusion. He goes, go for it. So I go outside, and I have a good old-fashioned talk, and then I get mad. And that's what I've done all my life, is get mad and come out fighting. Well, that cleared up my mind. I got back in there. Because, okay, yeah, I got it all figured out. So I sit down, I take the course, and not in 45 minutes. I went up to the last 2 minutes. of the exam, and off I go. I go and I sit down by the river. There's a Spokane River running through the town, and it's peaceful, and I just sit there shaking. And I'm thinking about my brother in heaven. I'm thinking my mother's still alive. And I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do if I flunk this? And it was going to take a couple of weeks to get the reports back, the results, I should say. And this was on a Friday, I believe, and so I spent the weekend basically sitting, trying to go over each question, trying to figure out how I had done, trying to get an idea, second thinking everything. And that Monday, Jim calls me, and he goes, "You didn't get this call." And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You passed." Now I'm euphoric. I'm going, oh my goodness. And I had gotten through the big exam, but that still didn't mean I was going to be an appraiser. It's just that I got that far. That's the second exam, but this one was far more difficult than the first one. So that was in the morning. Calls back that afternoon, and he goes, "Hey, would you like to come out to our dinner meeting?" And I said, "I'd be honored," but I had to run down and get a suit and a tie, and I didn't know how to tie the tie, so I got a clip-on tie, and I go to the dinner that night for the Society of Real Estate Appraisers. And I ask him, I go, since I passed the exam, can I join the society? By all means. And so I grabbed the application and a pen, or I had a pen for the first time in my life, I think, and I filled out the application and I give him the check, and now I'm a member. And that all happened in 2 or 3 minutes, but I remember what it did to my confidence that here a guy from the Good Old Boys Club wanted me in his organization. And the suit, it took me 5 minutes to buy the suit, but I'd look in the mirror and I'd walk around my apartment and I'd look at angles to see what I looked like. I would go down to the store and see how people reacted to me. I was trying to get comfortable within myself for the first time wearing a suit. And all of that had a huge impact on me, on my confidence. It made it soar. So I get down to the meeting that night, and I look around there, and I'm the only student in the class that was invited to the meeting, and that meant a lot to me. And so I get to the meeting, and here is a 60-year-old woman that just looked like she was filthy rich. And she was talking to Jim, and I didn't want to interrupt him, so I thought, well, I'll just walk by and see if he even acknowledges me. And so I stroll by like I didn't see him, and he yells out my name, and he invites me over, and he introduces me to this woman. And she's in her 60s, very expensive clothing on, just radiated confidence and success. And he says, "I'd like you to meet Gene." And so we talked, and a few minutes later, they announced that dinner's going to be served. And Gene says, "Hey, can I sit at your table with you?" And I'm going, "Yeah, great." And so she comes over. Well, she owned a savings and loan and had just sold it to a very large savings and loan in Seattle. So we sit there and we start chatting, and I am instantly comfortable with this woman, and that was the biggest angel on earth I ever met in my life. Here she is, a multimillionaire woman. She sees this rough kid that's got an ambition. And she sits at my table and she asks me 101 questions about me, my past. And then she says, "How did you ever get that score?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, I don't know whether I'm supposed to say anything or not, because they never told you the score. They just told you whether you passed or failed." And she goes, well, Jim told me you got the highest score in the history of Washington State.
Wow.
Well, it was still singing a French song, you know, Yvonne. I didn't know what I was doing. And so, to make a long story short, she invites me out to lunch the following day. She hired me as an appraiser, and I never looked back. And that woman and I fell in love as a mother-son relationship. And she taught me everything in my life. Taught me how to walk, talk.
You're not going to believe this, but we're going to run out of time soon. The hour's gone.
I talked too much.
No, you did not talk too much. I'm enthralled. I mean, what an inspirational story. But before we run out of time, because I am bringing you back, ladies and gentlemen, Kim is coming back because we didn't talk about half of the stuff we wanted to talk about. His story is just amazing. Tell the folks the name of the book, where it can be found, where you can be found.
Okay, the name of the book is I Remember the Time by Kim Hemphill, Hemphill, and it can be bought on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the stores.
And you can be found.
I can be
you
found.
You can be found on Facebook.
Yeah. If you go to Kim, K-I-M, Hemphill, HEMPHILL.com, so KimHemphill.com, you'll find my website there, and you'll see where the books can be. Or you can just go to Kim Hemphill on Facebook. Kim A. Hemphill, author Kim Hemphill. There's a couple
Ladies
of women.
And gentlemen, I have to tell you, if you don't do anything else, if you don't ever buy another book in your life, you have to buy this book, because you all know that I talk about dreams, and I talk about being successful, and I talk about not allowing anyone to steal your dream without your permission. Well, this gentleman is a dreamer. He was a dreamer. And he never allowed anyone, not even his own father, not even women who said they cared about him, to destroy his dream. I mean, when someone says, you cannot do that, I want to smack them, because you can do anything you want to do if you want to do it bad enough. And Kim proved that. Kim did it because Kim wanted it. Now, if anything, Kim should have failed, because he was set up for failure. He was abused. He was mistreated. The people that were supposed to protect him didn't. But in spite of it, we have a man who has a greater purpose. This man did not fall into the generational gap of continuing the abuse. He found someone that loved him for himself. He has beautiful children. He is a successful businessman. Now, this is a man that went from nothing. What we didn't talk about was Kim didn't even get his first toothbrush until he was 14 years old. Now, that tells you the kind of life that he was forced to live as a child. So when someone says, I have a dream, but I don't want to hear it, the dream is yours to lose. It is also yours to fulfill. Kim, would that be a fair statement?
For sure. I have these angels on earth that came to me, and I believe my God sent them to me. My brother sent them to me. They reached down. Now, I have found, over the last 40-some years, I found 6 people that mirrored the same. They were broken, they were down and out, but they had that desire. And they went from laborers to being appraisers, making 6-figure incomes, all of them quite successful. Now what I want to do with my platform is to reach out and take the proceeds from this book and fund advocates for children's rights. I want to stand on this platform, and I want to reach down, because when you break a child, there'll be times that they don't make it the way I did. More so than not, they don't make it. They stay broken. They can't get out of the muck. And I want to be there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Most children continue the cycle of abuse because that's the way that they think people are supposed to live.
Well, they're angry and they got mental issues, and I have raised my son without ever raising a hand, and him and I are best friends today, and he's now announced that he's going to come in and take over my companies. And I'm going, great, go for it.
So in July, ladies.
Because what do I want to do? I want to write books about our veterans. I want to write books about those people in our society that give back. I call them the giver backers. I want to build a team around me that will help me succeed in getting a legacy set up for these kids. And
so what we're going to do, we're going to bring Kim back in July, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to talk about his platform because, sadly, this hour, I don't know where it went. It possessed. It just disappeared. But I want to bring Kim back, and I want to talk about this platform because it's a very important platform. Because what Kim is talking about is finding people that do random acts of kindness and give back to society when they've become successful. If you know anyone, or if you are someone that has done that, you can reach Kim on Facebook. You can also reach me, and I can put you in contact with him. But I'm going to bring him back in July so we can specifically hone in on that platform. I think it's very important. But in the meantime, I want you to get his book, I Remember When. It is a very important book.
I remember the time.
I'm sorry, Kim. I remember the time. It's dark 30. I go brain stupid at dark 30.
Yes.
I remember the time. And get that book and read it because there's so many life's lessons that Kim has put in this book. And it was probably a very painful book to write on one hand, but yet a catharsis on another because his dream should have died on the vine a long time ago, and it didn't because he didn't allow it to. Kim, thank you so, so much for the honor.
Well, I thank you. You know who sent you?
God.
God sent you. Yeah, to me. So
yes.
I enjoyed this tremendously. I'm sorry for talking too much.
It's okay. It's
right.
Your story to tell. I mean, it's an amazing story. So what we'll do is we'll bring you back in July. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't go anywhere because the next hour we have author Austin Moratori, and I hope that I pronounced it right. He's on the phone with us now listening in. I hope I didn't crucify his name. And he's going to be an interesting guest, so hang around. You cannot hang up. Yeah, you can swip over and get Kim's book, but you got to come right back because you're going to miss something. Remember, tomorrow night you're going to have an interesting show as well because I get interviewed on my own show. Kim, if you want to hang around, hang around. I'm going to do a real quick ad, and then we'll be right back.
Best-selling and award-winning author of true crime and crime fiction, Yvonne Mason is back with a brand new book, The Pink Canary, a book that delves into the life of a drag queen and a marvelous whodunit. You can find this and all of Yvonne's other works on Amazon.com or find Yvonne Mason on Facebook and Twitter.
You're gonna kill me.
Buy your copy of Pink Canary now.
Yes, that was my ad man, Chris Dunham, talking about my book, The Pink Canary. And it is a comedy. It is fall down funny. It is set in Key West, and it will make you laugh till you cry. So let's start the next episode.
fashion emergency hotline.
Help! My kids just gave me an executive order for President's Day. New clothes now.
Just run to Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep. Right now, get up to 50% off store-wide and at OldNavy.com through President's Day.
Up to 50% off? I vote for that.
Me too. And right now, jeans start at $15 for adults, $12 for kids. And tees start at $7 for adults, $5 for kids.
$5 tees and jeans on sale? This is huge. I'm headed to Old Navy now. Thanks.
Don't thank me. Thank Old Navy. Valid 2/13 through 2/20. Select styles only.
Napa know-how.
The Napa guy knows not to judge a man by his car's multicolored paint job or absence of modern gadgetry. Who cares if it's technically old enough to vote and the windows are powered by the strength of your left arm? Your monthly payment is zero, and it'll stay that way. Because with over 500,000 parts and a little Napa know-how, you can keep anything on the road. She may not be pretty, but she's all yours. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.